My name is Gloria, and I'm 32 years old. Right now, I'm sitting in my small kitchen, staring out the window at the same view I've seen for 8 years, holding a job offer that could change everything. From the living room, I can hear voices getting louder, my husband Martin discussing my situation with his family. They think I can't hear them, but every word cuts through me like glass. This morning, I thought I was sharing the best news of my life. Instead, I'm facing the hardest choice I've ever had to make. Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who try hardest to keep you small. Before I dive into this story that changed everything for me, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever felt torn between your dreams and family expectations. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories. Trust me, what happened next will surprise you just as much as it surprised me. Let me take you back to where it all started. Martin and I had been married for 8 years, living in this quiet town in Ohio, where everyone knows everyone else's business. He worked as an engineer at the local manufacturing plant, the same job he'd had since college. It was steady, predictable, safe. That was Martin in a nutshell, really. A good man with a kind heart, but someone who'd never felt the burning need to reach for something bigger. Our life had fallen into a comfortable rhythm. We lived in a modest 2-bedroom house on Maple Street, with a small yard that Martin meticulously maintained every weekend. I worked at Peterson Accounting, handling books for local businesses. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and left me time for freelance marketing projects in the evenings. Those projects were my little escape, my way of staying connected to the creative world I'd always dreamed of joining. Martin's family lived just 10 minutes away, which in their minds meant we were practically neighbors. His mother, Dorothy, was the kind of woman who believed families should stick together through thick and thin. She'd raised her children with the firm conviction that success meant stability, and stability meant staying put. His father, Eugene, was a retired factory supervisor who'd worked the same job for 37 years and was proud of it. Then there was Janet, Martin's younger sister, who'd recently moved back home after a messy divorce in Cleveland. She'd become Dorothy's living proof that the outside world was dangerous and unpredictable. Every Sunday, without fail, we'd gather at Dorothy and Eugene's house for dinner. It was tradition, Dorothy would say, and traditions were what held families together. These gatherings followed the same pattern, week after week. Dorothy would cook a massive meal, enough to feed twice as many people. Eugene would hold court at the head of the table, sharing stories from his factory days or complaining about the state of the world. Janet would update everyone on her job search and her bitter feelings toward her ex-husband. And Martin and I would smile, nod, and play our parts as the stable, content couple. But beneath the surface, I was restless. I'd been working on freelance marketing campaigns for small businesses, staying up late to build portfolios and case studies. I'd taught myself graphic design, social media strategy, brand development. It was work that energized me in ways my day job never could. I dreamed of working for a real agency, creating campaigns that would reach thousands of people, building brands that mattered. Then, on a Friday afternoon in March, everything changed. I was finishing up the monthly reports for Henderson Hardware when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a Chicago number I didn't recognize. Gloria Martinez? The voice was professional, confident. This is Harold Richardson from Apex Marketing Solutions in Chicago. I hope you don't mind me calling directly, but I've been following your work. My heart started racing. Apex Marketing was one of the top agencies in the Midwest. I'd been following their campaigns for years, admiring their creativity and reach. We've seen the campaign you did for Riverside Boutique and the social media strategy for Thompson Construction, Harold continued. Frankly, we're impressed. We're looking for a director of creative strategy, and based on your portfolio, I think you'd be perfect for the role. I nearly dropped the phone. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Harold laughed. I know it's out of the blue, but your work speaks for itself. The Riverside campaign increased their sales by 60%, and Thompson Construction went from zero online presence to booking solid every month. We need someone with your instincts and creativity. The conversation lasted 45 minutes. Harold explained the position, the salary that was nearly double what I was making, the opportunity to work with national brands. They wanted someone who could think strategically, but execute creatively. Someone who understood both the business side and the artistic vision. It was everything I'd ever wanted in a career. I'll need to discuss this with my husband, I told Harold, my voice barely steady. Of course. Take your time, but I hope you'll consider it seriously, Gloria. Opportunities like this don't come around often. That evening, I could barely contain my excitement as I waited for Martin to come home. I'd rehearsed how I'd tell him, how I'd explain what this could mean for our future. When he walked through the door, still in his work clothes and looking tired, I practically bounced off the couch. Martin, you're not going to believe what happened today. I grabbed his hands, pulling him toward the kitchen table. Sit down. I have incredible news. He looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Did you win the lottery or something? Better. I took a deep breath. I got a job offer. A real job offer. From Apex Marketing in Chicago. They want me to be their director of creative strategy. I watched his face, waiting for the smile, the congratulations, the excitement. Instead, I saw confusion, then something that looked almost like disappointment. Chicago? He said slowly. That's pretty far away. It's only 5 hours by car. And Martin, the salary is $85,000, plus benefits, plus bonuses based on performance. Do you know what this could mean for us? He sat back in his chair, running his hands through his hair. I don't understand. Why would they call you? How do they even know who you are? I explained about my freelance work, about the portfolio I'd been building, about the results I'd achieved for local clients. But with every word, I could see him growing more uncomfortable. This is all happening so fast, he said, using the pet name he'd called me since we were dating. I mean, what about my job? What about our house, our life here? We could build a new life there, a better life. Martin, this is the opportunity I've been working toward for years. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. Let me think about this, okay? It's a lot to process. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling while Martin slept beside me. I'd expected him to be thrilled, to see this as the adventure we'd been missing. Instead, I felt like I'd told him about a terminal diagnosis. For the first time, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered a question I didn't want to acknowledge. What if he didn't want the same things I wanted? I decided to wait until Sunday dinner to share the news with the family. Maybe in a group setting, surrounded by people who loved us, the conversation would go better. Maybe they'd see the positive side that Martin seemed to be missing. Sunday arrived gray and drizzly, typical Ohio spring weather. Dorothy had made her famous pot roast, and the house smelled like home cooking and furniture polish. Eugene was in his usual spot in the living room, watching a basketball game with the volume turned up too loud. Janet was helping her mother in the kitchen, complaining about another failed job interview. The problem with employers today, Janet was saying as she mashed potatoes, is they want everything but they don't want to pay for it. They want experience, but they won't hire you to get experience. Dorothy nodded sympathetically. That's why family businesses used to work so well. People took care of their own. Martin and I arrived right on time, as always. I'd spent extra time getting ready, choosing a professional-looking blouse and slacks, wanting to look the part of someone who deserved a director-level position. Martin had been quiet during the drive over, and I could feel his tension like a third person in the car. Dinner started normally enough. Eugene carved the roast, while Dorothy fussed over making sure everyone had enough vegetables. Janet updated us on her latest dating disasters from the online apps she'd been trying. Martin talked about a project at work, some efficiency improvements they were implementing. Then, during a lull in conversation, I took a deep breath and dove in. I have some exciting news to share with everyone, I announced, trying to keep my voice bright and confident. I got a job offer this week from a marketing agency in Chicago. They want me to be their director of creative strategy. The reaction was immediate and complete silence. Dorothy's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Eugene paused mid-chew, staring at me like I'd just announced I was joining the circus. Janet's eyes widened, then narrowed. Chicago? Dorothy finally said, setting down her fork with deliberate care. That's very far away. It's only 5 hours, I replied, the same thing I'd told Martin. And it's an incredible opportunity. The salary is nearly double what I make now, and I'd be working with major national brands. Eugene swallowed his food and shook his head slowly. You young people today, always thinking the grass is greener somewhere else. What's wrong with what you have here? There's nothing wrong with what I have here, I said carefully. But this is a chance to grow, to use my skills in ways I never could at Peterson Accounting. Janet let out a short laugh. Skills? Gloria, you do books for Mike's Auto Shop in the corner grocery store. That's not exactly Madison Avenue. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I've been doing freelance marketing work for the past 3 years. Real campaigns, real results. That's how Apex found me. Dorothy reached over and patted my hand in that condescending way that made me feel like a child. Honey, I'm sure your little side projects are nice, but Chicago is a dangerous place. It's expensive, it's crowded, and it's no place for a married woman to be gallivanting around. I wouldn't be gallivanting, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I'd be working. In a professional environment, with colleagues and mentors who could help me grow. And what about Martin? Eugene asked, gesturing toward my husband, who was still sitting in complete silence. He's got a good job here, a secure job. You want him to throw that all away to chase after some pipe dream? It's not a pipe dream. It's a real opportunity with an established company. Established companies go out of business all the time, Janet chimed in. Especially in big cities where the competition is cutthroat. Some people just don't know how to appreciate what they have. I looked around the table, searching for any sign of support, any indication that someone might be happy for me. Instead, I saw worry, disapproval, and something that felt uncomfortably close to hostility. I appreciate what I have, I said quietly. But I also appreciate what I could become. Dorothy sighed heavily. Gloria dear, your generation has been sold this idea that you need to constantly be achieving more, wanting more, climbing some imaginary ladder. But happiness comes from contentment, from being grateful for your blessings. What about using your talents? What about making the most of your potential? Your talents are perfectly useful right here, Eugene said firmly. You help local businesses. You're part of this community. Why do you need strangers in some big city to validate you? The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with each family member taking turns explaining why my dream was unrealistic, dangerous, or selfish. They talked about crime rates in Chicago, cost of living, the stress of big city life. They mentioned other people they'd known who'd gotten above themselves and ended up miserable. Through it all, Martin sat silently, pushing food around his plate. When anyone looked to him for backup, he'd nod or shrug, but he never once spoke up in my defense. Never once said that he believed in me, or that he was proud of what I'd accomplished. By the time we left, I felt like I'd been put through an emotional meat grinder. The drive home was silent, both of us lost in our own thoughts. When we got home, Martin went straight to his computer, claiming he had work to catch up on. I sat on the couch, staring out the window, wondering how sharing good news had turned into such a disaster. That night, as I lay in bed listening to Martin's even breathing, I realized something that shook me to my core. For the first time in 8 years of marriage, I felt completely alone. The next week became a systematic campaign to change my mind. It started subtly, with Martin mentioning articles he'd read about urban crime or economic instability in major cities. He'd leave printouts on the kitchen counter about the cost of rent in Chicago, about the competitive job market, about companies downsizing their marketing departments. I'm just trying to be practical, he'd say when I asked about the articles. We need to look at this from all angles. But it wasn't just Martin. Dorothy called every other day with some new concern. She'd heard from a friend whose daughter lived in Chicago and was miserable. She'd seen a news report about a marketing executive who got laid off after 2 months. She'd read something online about how difficult it was for couples to maintain relationships under the stress of big city living. I'm not trying to discourage you, honey, Dorothy would say. I just want you to be realistic about what you're considering. Eugene started showing up at our house unannounced, usually with some pretext about borrowing tools or dropping off vegetables from his garden. But the conversations always turned to my job offer, and his perspective never varied. Chicago was expensive, dangerous, and full of people who would take advantage of small-town folks like us. You're not prepared for that kind of environment, he told me one evening while Martin was in the garage. These big city people, they're sharks. They'll eat you alive and spit out the bones. Even our neighbors got involved. Somehow, word had gotten around about the job offer, and everywhere I went, people felt compelled to share their opinions. Mrs. Henderson from the grocery store told me about her nephew who'd moved to Detroit and ended up addicted to drugs. Tom from the gas station warned me about how women get mugged on city streets. Even my boss at Peterson Accounting, Mr. Peterson himself, pulled me aside to express his concerns. You're making a mistake, Gloria, he said in his fatherly way. You've got security here, respect, a place in the community. Why would you throw that away for the unknown? The pressure was relentless and came from every direction. By the end of the week, I felt like I was under siege. Every phone call could be another person with another reason why I should stay. Every conversation became a minefield where someone might bring up my situation. Then Dorothy called a family meeting. "We need to talk about this as a family," she announced when she called me Friday evening. "Sunday after dinner, we're all going to sit down and discuss the Chicago thing properly. Dorothy, I appreciate your concern, but this is really something Martin and I need to decide together. Martin is my son, and you're my daughter-in-law. This affects all of us. We're a family, Gloria, and families make decisions together." Sunday dinner felt like a funeral. The pot roast might as well have been cardboard, and the conversation was stilted and formal. Everyone was clearly preparing for the main event. Finally, Dorothy cleared the dishes and Eugene turned off the television. They all gathered around the dining room table like it was a boardroom. "Now then," Dorothy began, folding her hands in front of her. "We need to have a serious discussion about this job situation." Eugene had prepared. He had printouts, statistics, charts, showing the cost of living differences between Ohio and Illinois. He'd researched crime rates, unemployment figures, housing costs. It was impressive in its thoroughness and devastating in its implications. "Look at these numbers," he said, spreading papers across the table. "Rent for a decent apartment in Chicago is 3 times what you pay for your mortgage here. Groceries cost 40% more. And that's assuming you both find jobs immediately." Janet had prepared too. She'd compiled stories from online forums about people who'd made similar moves and regretted them. Marriages that fell apart under the stress. Careers that imploded when people got in over their heads. Financial disasters when people overextended themselves. "I know everyone thinks I'm bitter because of my divorce," Janet said, her voice taking on a sharp edge. "But I learned something important. Ambition is a relationship killer. When one person starts thinking they're better than their current situation, it creates resentment and distance." Dorothy's approach was more emotional. She talked about family traditions, about how every generation before us had found fulfillment in simpler things. She spoke about the dangers of the modern world, about how easy it was to lose sight of what really mattered. "We've watched you grow up, Gloria," she said, her eyes getting teary. "You're like a daughter to us. And daughters sometimes need guidance when they're about to make decisions that could hurt them." But it was Eugene who delivered the line that would haunt me for months. "The thing is, Gloria," he said, leaning forward and fixing me with a stern look, "if you really loved us, you'd give up your dreams and stay here where you belong. That's what people do for family. They sacrifice." The room went completely silent. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. "Sacrifice," I repeated quietly. "That's right," Dorothy nodded. "Love means putting the people you care about ahead of your own wants." I looked around the table at these people who claimed to love me, who said they wanted what was best for me. Then I looked at Martin, still sitting in silence, still refusing to meet my eyes or speak up in my defense. "What if my dreams aren't just wants?" I asked. "What if they're needs? What if I'm slowly dying inside from not pursuing them?" "That's just selfishness talking," Janet said dismissively. "Everyone has fantasies about different lives. Mature people learn to be content with reality. But what if this is reality? What if this opportunity is real? Then it'll come around again if it's meant to be," Dorothy said firmly. "Good things don't require you to abandon everyone who loves you." I sat there for another hour, listening to them systematically dismantle every argument I made, every hope I had, every reason I'd given for wanting something more. They had an answer for everything, a counter-argument for every point. They'd clearly coordinated their approach, dividing up the responsibilities for crushing different aspects of my dream. When it was over, when they'd said everything they'd prepared to say, Dorothy reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We're only saying these things because we love you, honey. We don't want to see you get hurt." The drive home was silent again, but this time the silence felt different. It felt final. When we got home, Martin went to his computer and I went to our bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the mirror on the dresser. The woman looking back at me was someone I barely recognized. When had I become so small? When had I started measuring my worth by other people's comfort levels? When had I stopped believing in myself? That night, I made a decision that would change everything. It was 2 weeks after the family meeting when Harold called to ask for my final decision. I'd been avoiding his calls, sending emails, asking for more time, making excuses about needing to work out details. But he was running out of patience, and honestly, so was I. "Gloria, I need to know by Friday," he said, his voice kind but firm. "We have other candidates, and we can't wait indefinitely." "I understand," I'll have an answer for you by then. That night, Martin and I had the fight that had been building for weeks. It started over something silly, him leaving dishes in the sink, but escalated quickly into everything we'd been avoiding saying. You're gonna throw away our entire life for some fantasy, he said, his voice rising. 8 years of marriage, our home, our families, everything we've built together. What have we built, Martin? Really? We live in the same town we grew up in, doing the same jobs we've always done, having the same conversations with the same people. Where's the growth? Where's the adventure? Not everyone needs adventure, Gloria. Some of us are happy with stability. But I'm not happy. The words came out louder than I'd intended, echoing in our small kitchen. I'm not happy, and I haven't been for a long time. He stared at me like I'd slapped him. You're not happy? With me, with our marriage. I'm not happy with myself. I'm not happy with who I've become. I used to have dreams, Martin. I used to believe I could do something meaningful with my life. And being married to me isn't meaningful? That's not what I said, and it's not what I meant. But yes, I need more than just being someone's wife. I need to know what I'm capable of. So leave, he said suddenly, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. If I'm holding you back so much, if this life is so terrible, then just go. Is that what you want? He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was small and defeated. I want you to be happy. But I don't know how to be the person you need me to be. I need you to believe in me. I need you to support my dreams instead of helping everyone else tear them down. I'm scared, okay? He sat down heavily at the kitchen table. I'm scared that if we go to Chicago, I'll fail. Here, I'm somebody. I'm Martin Rodriguez, the guy who keeps the plant running efficiently. People respect me, they come to me for advice. In Chicago, I'll just be another anonymous guy trying to make it. For the first time in weeks, I saw past my own frustration to his fear. You think I'm not scared? You think this is easy for me? You're different, Gloria. You're braver than I am. You always have been. Then come be brave with me. He shook his head. I can't. I wish I could, but I can't. At 3 a.m, unable to sleep, I called Carolyn. She'd moved to Denver 2 years earlier to take a position with a nonprofit organization, and despite everyone's predictions of disaster, she was thriving. I was wondering when you'd call, she said, sounding wide awake despite the late hour. I heard through the grapevine about your job offer. Everyone thinks I'm crazy. Everyone thought I was crazy too. Remember? Your mother-in-law actually called my mom to express her concerns about my quote, 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 quote. Dee says, how did you do it? How did you leave everything behind? I realized I wasn't leaving everything behind. I was leaving behind the things that were holding me back. There's a difference. But what if they're right? What if I fail? What if you succeed? What if you're amazing at this job? What if you discover capabilities you never knew you had? What if Martin doesn't come with me? Then you'll know where you stand. Gloria, you've been living their dream, not yours. When are you going to start living for yourself? We talked for 2 hours, and by the time I hung up, something had shifted inside me. I'd been so focused on getting everyone else's approval that I'd forgotten the most important thing. I didn't need their permission to pursue my own life. The next morning, I called Harold before I could lose my nerve. Harold, this is Gloria Martinez. I'm calling to accept your offer. Excellent! I was hoping you'd say that. When can you start? I'll need 3 weeks to relocate and tie up loose ends here. Perfect. Welcome to the team, Gloria. I think you're gonna love it here. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen, looking around at the life I'd be leaving behind. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Telling Martin was harder than calling Harold had been. I found him in the garage that evening, tinkering with his workbench as he did when he needed to think. I called Harold today, I said without preamble. I took the job. His hands stilled on the screwdriver he was holding. He didn't look up. When do you start? 3 weeks. Are you asking me to come with you or telling me you're going? I'm hoping you'll come with me. But I'm going either way. He finally looked up and I saw a mixture of hurt and resignation in his eyes. You've already made up your mind. Yes. What if I said I'd come? What if I said I'd try to find a job in Chicago? I'd be thrilled. Martin, I want you with me. I want us to do this together. but you don't need me with you. I want you with me. There's a difference. He set down his tools and leaned against the workbench. I keep thinking about what my dad said, about sacrifice. Maybe he's right. Maybe love is about giving up what you want for the other person. Or maybe love is about wanting the other person to become everything they're capable of being. I don't know if I can do it, Gloria. I don't know if I'm strong enough to start over. Then I'll go alone. And maybe, when you see that I'm okay, when you see that change doesn't have to mean disaster, you'll join me. And if I don't, then we'll figure out what that means for us. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity and emotional ambush. Dorothy called within hours of hearing the news, sobbing into the phone about how I was breaking up the family. Eugene showed up at my office to make one final appeal to my sense of responsibility. Janet sent a series of increasingly nasty text messages about my selfishness and ingratitude. But I'd crossed some invisible line in my mind. The guilt that had been paralyzing me for weeks suddenly felt powerless. I'd made my choice, and for the first time in years, it was completely my choice. I gave my notice at Peterson Accounting. Mr. Peterson was disappointed, but not entirely surprised. I figured something like this was coming when you started getting restless, he admitted. You're too talented for what we could offer you here. I started sorting through our belongings, deciding what to take and what to leave behind. 8 years of accumulated stuff, much of it wedding gifts or things we'd bought because we thought we should have them. I kept what mattered and donated the rest. Martin watched this process with a mixture of fascination and horror. You're really doing this, he said one evening, watching me pack books into boxes. I'm really doing this. What if you hate it? What if it's everything they said it would be, dangerous and expensive and lonely? Then I'll figure it out. But at least I'll know I tried. And what about us? What about us? Martin, we can have phone calls and video chats. Chicago isn't the moon. You can visit, I can come back for weekends. Maybe after a few months, you'll see it's not the disaster everyone thinks it will be. Or maybe after a few months, you'll realize you don't need any of us anymore. I don't need you to complete me, Martin. I never did. But I want you in my life because I love you, not because I can't survive without you. 2 days before I was scheduled to leave, Martin made his decision. I can't do it, he said over breakfast. I thought I could work up the courage, but I can't. I'm going to stay here. I'd been expecting this, but it still hurt. Okay. Okay, that's it? What do you want me to say? That I'll stay? That I'll give up this opportunity to make you comfortable? I want you to fight for us. I am fighting for us. I am fighting for the version of us that could exist if we both became the people we're capable of being. But I can't want that for you more than you want it for yourself. So this is it? 8 years of marriage and you're just walking away? I'm not walking away from our marriage. I'm walking toward my future. I hope someday you'll want to join me there. My last night in the house we'd shared for 5 years, Martin stayed at his parents' house. I sat alone in our empty living room, surrounded by boxes and suitcases, thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. I wasn't leaving because I didn't love Martin. I was leaving because I'd finally learned to love myself enough to fight for my own life. The drive to Chicago was 5 hours of pure terror and exhilaration. I'd loaded everything I owned into my Honda Civic and a small U-Haul trailer. As I watched the familiar landmarks of home disappear in my rearview mirror, I felt like I was shedding an old skin. My first glimpse of the Chicago skyline made me pull over to the side of the highway. I'd seen it in pictures, of course, but seeing it in person, knowing I was going to be part of it, took my breath away. This was really happening. I was really doing this. The apartment I'd found online was a tiny one-bedroom in Lincoln Park, about twice what I'd been paying for my mortgage, but close to downtown and the Apex offices. When I walked in with my first box, the emptiness felt both intimidating and full of possibility. My first week at Apex was overwhelming in the best possible way. The offices were everything I'd imagined, modern and buzzing with creative energy. Harold introduced me around, and everyone seemed genuinely excited to have me there. The work was challenging, the pace was fast, and I loved every minute of it. But the nights were lonely. I'd call Martin, and we'd have stilted conversations about our days. He'd tell me about work, about his parents, about Janet's latest drama. I'd tell him about my projects, my colleagues, the energy of the city. We were living parallel lives that rarely intersected. How's the crime rate? He'd ask, and I'd know Dorothy had put him up to it. How's the cost of living? Became Eugene's question, filtered through Martin's voice. After a month, Martin's calls became less frequent. After 2 months, they were once a week. After 3 months, we were down to awkward check-ins every few weeks. But something amazing was happening with my work. The first project Harold assigned me was a rebranding campaign for a boutique hotel chain. I threw myself into it completely, researching their target market, analyzing their competition, developing a comprehensive strategy that positioned them as the choice for sophisticated travelers who wanted luxury without pretension. The campaign launched in September, and within 6 weeks, the client was reporting a 40% increase in bookings. Harold called me into his office, beaming. "This is exactly what we hoped for when we hired you," he said. "You have an instinct for this work that can't be taught." In October, I was assigned to lead the team for a major retail client's holiday campaign. In November, Harold mentioned there might be a promotion opportunity coming up. In December, I got my first real taste of success when our holiday retail campaign was featured in Advertising Age as one of the most effective of the season. I was working late one evening in January, putting finishing touches on a presentation for a potential new client, when my phone rang. It was Martin. "I saw the article about your campaign," he said without preamble. "In that advertising magazine. Mom showed it to me. Dorothy reads Advertising Age? She's been following your career online. She showed me your company's website, all the awards you guys have won. And I think I owe you an apology. Actually, I think we all owe you an apology." "Martin, no, let me say this. I was scared. We were all scared. And instead of admitting that, we tried to convince you that your dreams were the problem." "What changed?" "I did. Or maybe I'm starting to. I applied for a job in Chicago. There's an engineering firm there that needs someone with my experience in manufacturing systems. Martin, you don't have to do that for me. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me. I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of being the guy who plays it safe, while his wife conquers the world. I'm not conquering anything. I'm just finally doing what I should have been doing all along." When I told my parents about the job application, my dad said something that stuck with me. He said maybe it's time I stopped being proud of staying in one place and started being proud of my son for being brave enough to grow. Eugene said that? Shocked me too. Apparently, watching you succeed has been eye-opening for all of them. Mom's been bragging about you to her church ladies. Janet's been thinking about taking some online courses. And you? I've been thinking about what kind of man I want to be. And I want to be the kind of man who's worthy of being married to someone like you. 3 weeks later, Martin moved to Chicago. He'd gotten the engineering job, and while the transition wasn't easy, he threw himself into it with an energy I hadn't seen from him in years. We found a larger apartment in a neighborhood that felt like home to both of us. 6 months after that, Harold promoted me to Senior Director of Creative Strategy, with a team of 8 people reporting to me and a salary that seemed almost surreal compared to what I'd been making in Ohio. But the real measure of success wasn't the money or the title. It was the way I felt when I woke up in the morning, energized and excited about the day ahead. It was the way Martin and I talk to each other now, as equals and partners in building something together. It was the phone call from Dorothy, telling me how proud she was and asking for advice about Janet's new business idea. "You know what I realized?" Martin said one evening as we sat on our balcony, looking out at the city lights. "I wasn't protecting our marriage by trying to keep you small. I was slowly killing it. And I realized that loving someone doesn't mean making them comfortable. Sometimes it means pushing them to become who they're meant to be. Even if that means disappointing them temporarily. Especially if it means disappointing them temporarily. It's been 1.5 years since I made the decision that changed everything. As I sit here in my office on the 32nd floor, looking out at Lake Michigan, I sometimes can't believe this is my life. Martin and I are stronger now than we ever were in Ohio. The distance we traveled wasn't just geographical. It was emotional and spiritual. We had to learn how to love each other, as the people we were becoming, not just as the people we'd always been. Dorothy and Eugene have visited us twice now. The first time, Dorothy spent the whole weekend worried about crime and expenses. The second time, she asked me to take her shopping on Michigan Avenue and admitted that maybe city life wasn't as terrible as she'd imagined. Janet ended up taking a course in digital marketing and started a small consulting business for local companies in Ohio. She called me last month to ask for advice about a particularly challenging client. "I never understood what you were talking about before," she said, "but now I get it. There's something addictive about helping a business find its voice. But the most important change is in how I see myself. I'm not the woman who sits quietly while other people decide what's best for her. I'm not the person who apologizes for wanting more or feeling guilty for pursuing excellence. I've learned that there's nothing selfish about becoming everything you're capable of being. The work continues to challenge and fulfill me. Last month, our agency won 3 major industry awards, including one for a campaign I spearheaded for a national nonprofit. Seeing my work make a difference on that scale, knowing that my ideas are reaching millions of people, gives me a satisfaction I never found in keeping books for local businesses. Martin has flourished too. His new company has put him in charge of a major efficiency overhaul for a manufacturing client, and he's discovered he has a talent for leadership that he never had the opportunity to develop in Ohio. He's more confident, more ambitious, more alive than I've ever seen him. You know what the funny thing is? He said to me recently. Everyone was so worried about us failing that they never considered what would happen if we succeeded. And what do you think would have happened if I'd stayed? I think we would have been fine. Comfortable, stable, fine. And in 20 years, we would have looked at each other and wondered what we might have been capable of if we'd been brave enough to find out. Sometimes people ask me if I regret anything about the decision I made. The honest answer is that I regret waiting so long to make it. I regret all the years I spent letting other people's fears limit my possibilities. I regret the time I wasted trying to get permission to live my own life. But I don't regret disappointing people who would rather see me small than successful. I don't regret refusing to sacrifice my dreams for their comfort. And I don't regret learning that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept less than what you know you're capable of achieving. Love isn't about keeping people in boxes that make you feel secure. Real love is about wanting the people you care about to become everything they're meant to be, even if that means they outgrow the version of themselves that you fell in love with. The woman who sat in that small kitchen in Ohio, afraid to disappoint people by pursuing her dreams, feels like a different person now. She was smaller not because she lacked talent or ambition, but because she'd been convinced that taking up space was selfish. Now I know better. Taking up space isn't selfish when you use that space to create something meaningful. Pursuing excellence isn't arrogant when you use your success to lift up others. And choosing growth over comfort isn't betrayal when it allows you to bring more to every relationship in your life. If you're sitting somewhere right now, holding back from something you know you should pursue because someone told you it's selfish to want more, I want you to consider this. What if the most generous thing you could do is become everything you're capable of becoming? What if your success inspires others to pursue their own dreams? What if the example of your courage gives someone else permission to be brave? What dreams are you postponing because someone told you it's selfish to want more? What would happen if you decided that loving them didn't require you to stay small? What would your life look like if you chose growth over comfort, possibility over security, becoming over being? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever faced pressure to give up your dreams for other people's comfort? How did you handle it? Hit that like button if this story resonated with you. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about choosing courage over comfort. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to want more from life. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, the people who truly love you will eventually celebrate your success, even if they can't understand your dreams. Here's to all of you who are brave enough to disappoint people temporarily in order to become who you're meant to be permanently.